Hi guys, and welcome to Techfurb. Today we're going to be taking a look at a GTX 1080 and we're going to be comparing it directly against a GTX 1080 Ti. So, let's get into it. Okay, so the premise of today's video is going to be a bit different to the last one I did on this, gorgeous 1080 Ti card there. That's the EVGA For the Win 3 edition, if you were not aware. Now, in the last video I focused a bit more on, is it relevant for the average gamer that can only afford, a very mid-range budget, like, $2,000 and under sort of thing. And reality was, there was no performance difference between the two, so yeah, that was what I learned out of the one. So anyway, moving on from that last video, we're going to look at something that's a bit more high-end this time. We're going to be examining the 1080 GTX 1080, and ultimately what I want to know, both these cards, if you have a 1440p monitor and down, are complete and utter overkill. At most you want maybe a 1070 or a EVGA 56, depending on whether you're a fan of the green team or the red team. I don't mind either way. You spend your money however you want to. But where we're going to be looking is 3440 by 1440 in particular. That is a 3K ultra wide resolution, and that is where the 1080 and 1080 Ti start to become relevant, and that's where you do need these cards at those resolutions. So, and of course the other caveat is if you're doing high refresh rate gaming and you're looking 144 Hz and up. That's when you need these cards. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to see the difference. Now, the other important thing I should note here is pay close attention to the price to performance, because the price difference of these two cards at the moment. So I've got the page up here on Newmart. It probably isn't showing up well on the camera, but it is $1,200 for that GTX 1080 Ti. And if we shift over to the 1080, we are looking at $700. So that's $500 difference, and it's no small amount in Australian dollars to scoff at. That's quite, you can build a budget system for that amount of money. So it's a fair difference. And what I want to know is if I had, let's say I had $4,000 sitting in the bank and I could afford to buy a 34-inch 3440 by 1440p monitor. I want to know, do I need to go out and get that 1080 Ti as well to run that screen? But I don't think that's a necessity. But hey, we're going to go through these benchmarks and we are going to find out. So, first benchmark, cab off the rank, is Star Wars Battlefront 2. And this guy is very good on the GPUs. It gives you a nice, beautiful little scaling metric. You get an idea of, what's the difference between the cards. And if we have a look at 2560 by 1080p resolution, now I also included the RX 480 benchmarks from the last video. I had the numbers there and I thought it might be useful to throw these in just because it gives you a reference point of how the average mid-range card, also known as a GTX 1060, would perform compared to its higher-end counterparts. So this is for probably the masses. Most people are going to be running that mid-range sort of RX 480, RX 580, or 1060 cards. So, from top to bottom, RX 480 card, we had 73 average, 58 minimums, and 52 1% lows. Now, not too bad. This is again at that lower end ultra wide resolution, and of course the two very important details that we're looking at here. The 1080 was 119 average as opposed to 126 average on the 1080 Ti. So on initial looks, there's not a whole lot of difference here, but what I will say is this is actually probably a bottleneck on part of my Ryzen 7. That CPU is probably not ideal for a 1080 Ti when you're trying to maximize your frame rates. You will need to go with the 8700K if you're looking at that. So yeah, the lower resolution, there's not a whole lot of telltale difference. However, once we go to that 3440 by 1440p resolution, everything changes. We're having a look at an average of 84 for the 1080 and an average of 110 for the 1080 Ti. So big difference, and the 1% and 0.1% lows are again relatively similar. No stuttering, game ran incredibly well on both cards, looked amazing. I was quite pleased at that resolution, and I'm very lucky that I had a friend that lent me his Trinity Ti and his monitor. So yeah, thanks to Manus for friggin' helping out the channel in that one. Anyway, next set of benchmarks is Battlefield 1, and we're having a look at 76 on the average for the RX 480, again representing the mid-range. I won't probably mention that card too much more here because that card has been covered a fair bit on the channel, but again, you know, it's there as a reference point. So again, the 1080 Ti, we didn't really see a CPU bottleneck. I believe that the graphics cards are actually a bottleneck in Battlefield 1, which is great to see that the Ryzen is performing so well. We saw an average of 122 at the 1080p ultra wide res for the GTX 1080, and 1080 Ti got a score of 152 average. So that's not bad from both camps, and the 1% and 0.1% lows were pretty much the same. So potentially CPU bottleneck on that part. Maybe there's a certain effect that the Ryzen CPU doesn't like. But anyway, then we move on to the 1440p, the ultra wide. And we're having a look at 86 on the average for the GTX 1080 and 111 for the 1080 Ti. Now, you know, again, we're seeing that performance difference. It is there, but overall, we're still above 60 frames per second at that 3440 by 1440p res. However, again, if you've got a 100 Hz monitor or above at that resolution, this is where you start to need that 1080 Ti. So it's interesting to see that there is a difference. It's reasonably large too. So next we had CSGO, and I'm going to very quickly move over this benchmark because it looks like we have a CPU bottleneck all round. RX 480 146, 1080 Ti 156 at the 1080p ultra wide resolution. 100% CPU bottleneck right there, and then we have the 1440p ultra wide 137 and 144. So CPU bottlenecked. Unfortunately, guys, I'm very sorry about that benchmark, but it looks like the Ryzen 7 doesn't really like CSGO. But hey, you know, I wouldn't complain about having 150 frames per second as being a bottleneck, so it's not really an issue. Then we have Doom, and this game looks like we're CPU bound at 1080p ultra wide again. Now we're looking at 127, actually beating the 1080 Ti, so I wonder what happened there. That's a bit funky. Anyway, 127 versus 123, I guess there was some sort of CPU bottleneck going on at that resolution. Then at the 1440p ultra wide, it starts to switch back to the way it should be, and we see the gap go kaboom. Out it goes again, the 1080 Ti winning 119 to 101 on the 1080. So pretty good. Overall, Doom. Now, this is the thing I will say about Doom. This is the one game, well, not one game, but is one of the games that if you have a high refresh rate monitor, you do care. Because this game looks amazing on a high refresh rate monitor. I had an experience, this is my first experience with a high refresh rate monitor, with that 34-inch ultra wide, and oh, this game was amazing at you know, 100 Hz. So that was a good experience. Now, moving on to the next benchmark, we had a F1 2017. Again, new benchmark in the arsenal. I'm quite proud to have included this one. And we didn't see a CPU bottleneck. Now, I always thought this was a CPU bottlenecked game. And perhaps that is the story for a lower end CPU, or maybe it just loves Ryzen and it doesn't bottleneck, which is a rarity when you're dealing with a 1080 Ti. So we see perfect scaling, 101 versus 123 at the 1080p ultra wide resolution. 1080 Ti again winning because it is superior. And at 1440p ultra wide, we saw 76 versus 103. So you know, there's a difference. We're still well above 60 frames per second on the 1080 GTX 1080, which is great if you don't have a high refresh rate monitor at this resolution. But you got that high refresh rate monitor, we are starting to see a justification for the 1080 Ti, so that is awesome news. Let's move on. Next is GTA 5, and this is a game that I don't understand why, but it does not run well on PC. It's terrible on PC. So 73 versus 87 at 1080p ultra wide. We are definitely not CPU bottlenecked in this case because there is perfect scaling that we're expecting. And again, 1440p, same deal, 50 versus 68. First time we haven't seen the 1080 hit 60 frames per second at the 1440p ultra wide resolution, so that is quite interesting. Now, GTA 5 is the only game where I should probably mention the settings at this point. So every single game has been done at ultra, whatever the maximum settings for it is at the respective resolutions. GTA 5, exceptions to the rule. I run it at very high settings on everything I possibly can, and 4x and anisotropic filtering, MSSA, all that sort of stuff. Anything where there's an X blah, how do I explain this? Multiplier, it is X4. So that's how I do GTA 5. It's a bit of a pain in the neck to benchmark, but everyone seems to play that game, so I include it because everyone still plays it. So, you know, why not include it? Next one is Project Cars. This is one of my more favoured games to play. It's a bit of a fun one to benchmark because I have to sit there with the controller. I don't use a racing wheel, so I often crash quite a bit because I don't really know how to drive with the controller. Racing wheel, I'm fine. But anyway, we saw an average of 94 versus 107 at 1080p ultra wide. You know, great, awesome. 82 versus 91 at 1440p. Not a whole lot of difference, but we are exceeding 60 frames per second, which is great for the 1080. And you got that high refresh rate monitor, you're going with the 1080 Ti again. Next, we have... What do we have? Pardon me. So, next up is Ghost Recon Wildlands, and bit of a surprise. So I think the benchmark didn't run very well at 1440p on this one because it looks like the 1080 beat it. But anyway, we'll glaze over that. We'll focus on the 1080p ultra wide. I'm amazed actually. Neither game, only the 1080 Ti gets 60 frames per second in this game. This game is intense on graphics cards. It is of course running at the ultra preset, the absolute maximum preset. So, you know, it's fair enough that it's hemorrhaging the graphics cards, but yeah, so we're starting to see a justification for the 1080 Ti in this case because it is the only card that can do 60 frames per second on max settings. And I would probably just disregard the bottom two benchmarks as it looks like that I muddled up the 1080 Ti runs. Anyway, let's move on. So we've got Watch Dogs 2 and Return to Form for the 1080 Ti. It's where it should be. Again, this is a really rough game on graphics cards. Ubisoft is very... I don't know what they do with their games, but almost every single game of theirs that I have benchmarked is absolutely hemorrhaging the hardware it runs on. Yeah, so 64 average at 1080p ultra wide versus 75, and 43 versus 57. So can't even hit 60 frames per second at that 1440p ultra settings. So yeah, that is pretty much it for the normal benchmarks. Now we're on to synthetics. And we're seeing, again, so the reason why we run synthetics is because it gives us perfect scaling. This removes any CPU bottlenecks, gives us an idea where the GPU should be, and, you know, these Firestroke and TimeSpy are used by almost every single article out there, so it gives you the ability to cross-reference with other media outlets, whether it be, you know, traditional blogs or vlogs or whatever you want to call them, or, you know, like YouTube reviews like mine. So... Anyway, 16,894 for the 1080 and 19,608 for the 1080 Ti. So overall, fantastic. And the poor little RX 480 is just getting crushed up there. It looks like a very low-end card, but it really isn't. So that's kind of shows you the performance jumps at the high end. But I must say, this graph kind of tells it all because the 1080 is getting beaten. But it's only getting beaten by, what, 20%? Maybe 20%? And there is certainly not a 20% price difference. There's well, I'd say about 75 to 80% price difference between the GPUs. So it's quite significant. And, you know, I guess at that high end you're paying a lot more money to get marginally better performance. But, hey, next one was TimeSpy. Again, perfect scaling. 480 gets crushed. 1080 gets 7,526, and the 1080 Ti almost cracks 10,000, 9,383. Again, fantastic, but that 1080 is really not that far off that 1080 Ti. So that is going to wrap it up for the benchmarks, and let's roll on to that conclusion. Okay, so conclusion time. Should you go with the GTX 1080 or the GTX 1080 Ti? It's a great question, and it's hard to answer, I'm going to be honest. From a pure price to performance perspective, the 1080 absolutely wins. The 1080 Ti does not boast the same price to performance as the 1080. But when you're at this end of the spectrum, it's not about price to performance as much as... there's two kinds of people that are going to get the 1080 Ti. So the first kind is the ones that just have... they just want the best. That's basically the short and sweet of it. They have a certain desire to have the best graphics card on the market, and they are willing to pay for it, and they will get it. Good on them. Best of luck. Enjoy their lives. But for the logical thinkers that are looking at this rationally, there's probably only a couple of use cases where I see the point of the 1080 Ti. The first one would be at 4K. If you are running 4K games and you want to run them on the absolute highest settings you possibly can, you're going to be getting that 1080 Ti. The 1080 gets very close, but I would say the 1080 Ti edges it out at the 4K resolution. And if you can afford the price jump of that extra $500, which when you're buying 4K gear, I would hesitate to say that you wouldn't be, because when you're buying at the high end, you've usually $500 is not a big difference. But when you are running at the 3440 by 1440p resolution, and you are not running a 100 Hz or above monitor, that's when my point changes. I would see at that point that there is no reason to get the 1080 Ti. Much as the same conclusion I came to last week. Reality is, you don't need to spend... If you have a certain set of games and you have a certain set of hardware, like your peripherals, your monitors are all lined up, just get the GPU that will achieve what you need to achieve in those two areas. As long as it can run the games at the resolution and refresh rate that your monitor can achieve, then just buy that damn graphics card. This is the point here. So if you're on mid-range, you're running 1080p monitors like me, or you're running an ultra-wide 1080p monitor like me, just get the RX 480, just get the GTX 1060, it's not RX 480 anymore, get the RX 580 or the GTX 1060 and call it a day. Honestly, you won't see any benefit from going any higher than those two cards at those resolutions. However, if you are high refresh rate monitors, and this is the other thing, at 1080p 144Hz, just get the 1080. The only time I would see at 1080p that you would see a benefit for the 1080 Ti is on a 240Hz monitor. That is the only time that will make sense. And even then you're going to be turning down settings on the game, because that is a ridiculous figure to achieve. 240 frames per second is obnoxious, and no current gen hardware can do that on ultra settings, unfortunately. So that's the reality of it. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked it, and I hope this video was informant. It helps you with any purchasing decisions, or you just wanted to watch a video of high-end hardware, because hey, we all like to do that. I do it myself. I have watered my mouth over both of these cards in different forms. Of course, not just these two in particular cards, but the 1080 and the 1080 Ti, the GPUs. There's something special about them. They're the ultimate tier of performance, and I want them, but now I don't. I'm going to be honest. Now that I've actually used them and I actually know what the difference is, I'm not interested in them. So I'm going to leave you with that, guys. Leave a like if you liked it. Leave a dislike if you disliked it. Comments down below if you have anything to say. If you disagree with me strongly, that is fine. And I will catch you in the next video. Oh, get subscribed. It helps. Please. Alright, thanks guys. Bye.